All right, this will be a quick video. I just want to talk about the rules, the restrictions of what we can and can't name variables, and then also the stylistic conventions of what you should name variables, which you technically don't have to follow. Okay, so first up, let's talk about restrictions. So in Python, you can name your variables with whatever you want with a couple exceptions. So variables have to start with a letter or underscore. So we can't have one start with a number 9 or a parenthesis or something or a question mark. It needs to be a letter or underscore. So cats, underscore cats is good. 2 cats is not good. Next up, the rest of the name must consist of letters, numbers, or underscores. So we can have numbers in our variables. They just can't start off the variable. So cats2 is fine. But something like hey at you is not okay because the at sign, whatever that thing is called, is not a letter, number, or underscore. Also, names are case sensitive. So this is an important one. These 2 variable names are not equal to one another. If you haven't seen this exclamation to mean not equals, we'll see that in a bit. But uppercase cats is not the same as cats with a capitalized C. Or this version, uppercase C cats is not equal to all lowercase cats. Python thinks that they're all entirely different. So those are the rules, the things that you have to follow in Python. And I'll show you, let me make some space here. I could make a new variable, cats2 blah, blah, blah. Let's just do that. Equals 1. Why not? And I can hit tab, so I don't have to type that whole thing. It's not a good variable name because it makes no sense and it's really long, but Python's fine with it. But if I try and do 2 people equals, 344, Python gives me an error. And this is actually probably our first error we've seen in the course. It tells me invalid syntax, and it's pointing to 2 people, meaning that it's not a valid name for variable. It just gives up. Python has rules. It reads your code and it gets to a new word and it notices, okay, for this to be a variable, it has to start with a letter or an underscore, and it doesn't, so I don't know what to do with this. I'm going to freak out and throw an error. Okay, so you'll get the same error if you tried to do something like colt@gmail equals something. Let's do numbers. That's not my email address, by the way. I wish it was, but it's not. As you see here, we get an error. It's actually different. It can't assign to operator, and that's because Python thinks that these symbols are operators. We'll talk about that later. Sort of like the plus sign and the minus sign are operators. So we couldn't do colt plus 1 equals 6. Same problem. It thinks we're trying to assign to the plus sign, and the plus sign already means something in Python, so it's a problem. Okay, so we've talked about what you can and can't name things, what will actually cause real problems. Now let's talk about conventions. If you haven't heard of naming conventions or code conventions, it's just a way of saying style, guidelines, things that most people think you should do and you might get made fun of if you don't do, but won't actually break your application. So most Python programmers prefer to use standard style conventions when naming things. So that means variables should be snake case, which means using underscores to separate words. Camel case, if you're familiar with that, means using an uppercase letter, so something like camel uppercase case versus snake case, where a word is separated by an underscore. So you can do this in Python. Remember, there's nothing that prevents you from using uppercase letters, but the convention is to use underscores. And it's called Python, and snake case makes sense. So there we go. Now, variables should be lowercase. Most variables should be lowercase. There are a couple exceptions. So if you see something like this, all capitals and snake case refers to things that are called constants, which we haven't talked about yet, but they're just variables, but the idea is that they don't change. So something like pi, you don't want to rewrite pi a bunch of times, right? 3.14159, blah, 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 blah. I used to know a lot more digits. We don't want to type that ourselves manually, so we could store it in a variable. But to make it clear that it's a constant, that it shouldn't change, because the value of pi shouldn't change in our code, we put it in all caps. So if you see code that has constants, you'll notice them because they're in all caps, and that's the reason. It's a little flag that says, hey, I'm a constant, don't mess with me. If you see upper camel case, so camel case again means that we're not using underscores, we're using capital letters to separate words. That refers to a class, which is all I'll say on that for now. We will see classes a lot later on in the course, but upper camel case is usually referring to classes. And then variables that start and end with 2 underscores, like this. So there's 2 right there on either side, are called dunders, stands for double underscore, D under, but really the idea is that you just shouldn't touch them. They're not supposed to be for you to mess with. So this is more common when you're working with other people's code, maybe an open source project or something that we're using that we didn't write. Well, the author of that code could basically say, please, this variable is not meant to be touched or messed with because it could cause real problems to the application or to the library. So we recommend you just leave it alone. Now, that doesn't mean that you couldn't change it. There's no way for, in Python to say that this thing cannot ever be changed at all, but it's more of a way, just a signifier that you should leave this alone. Okay, so that's it for conventions. So there are restrictions and conventions. Just keep in mind what's what, but really it helps if you just kind of merge them together and just follow the conventions as if they were restrictions, and that'll make it easier for you.